What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut EP by Brotha Lynch Hung. Basically, this project is called 24 Deep and it came out in the fall of 1993. Now, I want to go ahead and say that this is basically Brotha Lynch Hung's debut project as well. I know he had an album in early 1995 called Season of the Sickness, which I almost reviewed back in the day, probably back in early 2016 or so, but I just didn't get around to it. But it's been a while. I've taken quite a vacation from Brotha Lynch Hung, but he kind of quit putting out projects. He got signed to N9ne's Strange Music label like in 2010, and he dropped a number of projects. I want to say he had one last project that he dropped as like an EP in 2016 that was on Strange Music. I need to review that one also, but then he just kind of vanished. And apparently, I looked him up again. I looked him up across the past few years. He has been putting out EPs and such. So he has. I have looked him up. He has done like the occasional project, mostly through EPs and collaboration projects and that type of stuff. But his last true album was like Manable Lecter from 2013. So I want to say there is a possibility that he dropped Season of the Sickness 2, which came out in 2022, but there's just not a ton of information about it, even on some of the websites that are more prone to that, like Discogs and websites like that. So I don't really know for certain. But yeah, I'm going to get back to Brotha Lynch Hung. This is a pretty excellent project, I would have to say. This is just full of songs on here. It has 6 songs plus some good little horrorcore bits in here as far as interludes and stuff. So it's a pretty dope project. Definitely reminds me of some other stuff from '93. Like last year I reviewed an EP with Jackal Goldkick by Esham, and that was pretty similar to this project. And then there was another one by Easy E called 187 Kill. That's pretty similar. So it's interesting kind of get some of these late 93 kind of horrorcore EPs, because Brotha Lynch Hung is basically like a master of doing this. I would definitely say you definitely need to check out Season of the Sickness. I am eventually going to review that, but this is a pretty vintage project here, especially for 1993. I just wasn't expecting the sheer kind of full-blown quality that it has. I definitely feel like this is pretty top-notch, full of songs. The thing about it is Brotha Lynch is from California, so you kind of get some G-funk and gangster rap kind of vibes too. It's basically like Snoop Dogg or like Easy E, just with kind of like a more kind of G-funk. It's basically like an Easy E version of like horrorcore, just in like a more kind of horrific kind of tone. I would definitely say it's that same kind of pitch. It's very similar. This feels like if you like the Chronic and Doggy Style and 187, if you like the Chronic and Doggy Style, and then if you also like some other G-funk stuff like 187 Killa by Eazy and some of that type of stuff, I would definitely say that this is some good stuff as far as that kind of goes, just with that sort of pitch. It has a lot of kind of really kind of slurred out kind of songs on here, like some songs like Had to Gatcha and some songs like Had to Gatcha and Walk Into My Funeral are really like some real kind of mellow and just kind of breezy kind of slurred out kind of tunes I definitely like. So that's some good stuff on there. Go ahead and talk about the single, because there was one. I do like the concept behind it. It's basically the most popular song on this project, and basically, this song is the most popular song on Spotify of this project, and it's called 24 Deep. It's the title track. So the title track is the single. 24 Deep is basically I would say that 24 Deep has the best beat on this whole EP. Just really great, just a nice syrupy kind of low guitar licks of a beat on there. It's great for 1993, I would definitely say, and it's just a good mellow kind of G-funk bop, and it's definitely a 40-ounce kind of song. If you just like to purchase 40 ounces and kind of have some of that laid back malaise, just playing a little bit of PS2 and kicking back, bopping tunes, some of that type of stuff, hitting up women, some of that type of stuff, this is a good tune for that sort of tone. Just really kind of just feels very drunken and just kind of syrupy, mellow kind of feels towards it. Just great little California bop. But this one's not quite as breezy and quite as drowsy as like Had to Gatcha and Walk Into My Funeral, but this is a great horrorcore beat. This is like an excellent kind of signature kind of song. This is probably one of the best beats in rap music out of 1993, I would definitely say. I mean, it just was interesting how immediately that kind of Brotha Lynch hit that G-funk kind of sound just like that, because a year ago from when this project dropped, the Chronic hadn't really come out, and there wasn't a ton of G-funk really going around. It was still kind of like a commodity at that particular time. This is just an excellent, real kind of twang, or real kind of syrupy, low guitar licks kind of beat. So that's kind of the thing. But to talk about the songs I recommend on this EP, there's 6 songs on here, and the only real song I don't recommend on this project is just Jackin' for Joints, which is kind of just like a typical kind of more vintage The only real song on this project I don't enjoy that much is just Jackin' for Joints, which is basically like a more vintage and kind of golden age of rap kind of tune. It definitely reminds me of something Public Enemy would do, or one of those type 80s groups, something like that. But the problem with it is the pull off of it is the same problem I had with like Tupac Strictly for My Niggas albums. Just it feels like too much kind of jazziness that just doesn't have enough appeal towards it. I mean, it feels very much like a city hopping kind of tune. Feels very much like a city hopping kind of tune, just typical of like NWA and Public Enemy and some of those type folks run DMC, but it just doesn't pull it off in nearly an interesting enough way. So it's kind of the concept. I just feel like compared to 24 Deep, Had to Gatcha, Lose a Hoe, Gain a Hoe, especially, even Backfade, this song, Jackin' for Joints, just pales in comparison. It just really feels like archaic, and I do like some of those beats. I've listened to some of them from like the late 80s, mid 80s and stuff, but this is not a good rendition of it. So that's kind of the thing. But talk about some of these other songs. Basically, the second best beat on this album, I would say, would be Lose a Hoe, Gain a Hoe. Yeah, the second best beat on this album is Lose a Hoe, Gain a Hoe. It's like a very slick, sneering beat with good infectiousness about it. This really competes with 24 Deep. Probably should have been a single, and it's a very nice song, but it's kind of long. It's almost 7 minutes. It's 6 minutes and 55 seconds. I feel like if they would have trimmed this by like probably about 80, 85 seconds, something like that, it probably could have been like the second best. It could have been like the second single on this project. And overall, this basically to me is like the second best song in terms of production, but this is a little bit lengthy. It's kind of like more of a task. It's more of like a more composed task to listen to. It's not a bad song, but this is a lengthy one. So that's really the only real kickback from it. I still recommend the song. It's not an almost song either. It's a song I recommend, but it's just kind of one where it's kind of borderline that just because of the length of the song. But it is a pretty excellent one. Just this real pulsating kind of bop that competes with 24 Deep. Just another real kind of this shrill kind of one. Had to Gatcha. I feel like another nice one is Had to Gatcha. This takes a quote from a Cypress Hill song. This is just a very sleepy, kind of Cali drunken bops, very breezy in like a slurred kind of way. And it's just some G-funk kind of day malaise, just kind of cruising around, that type of stuff. It just feels like you're really kind of slurred out of your mind, just had few too many 40 ounces or beers, something like that. Just a great song just for kind of being drowsy and just sluggish as far as that kind of goes. Just a good example of that. This is a good example of experimenting with G-Funk and being able to do it extremely well. Because Cypress Hill kind of would do songs like this, but they would be more smoke prone. Snoop Dogg kind of did songs like this with like Doggy Dog World, but this one's just a lot more drowsy and just kind of drunkenly sleepy. I just like the concept of getting that one. Just an overall excellent one on here. It's a little bit breezy. It's not quite as syrupy and quite as shrill as like 24 Deep and Lose a Hoe, Gain a Hoe, but it's just kind of a nice breezy kind of one. I feel like a very nice smoking song on here is Back Fade. This is kind of a getting stuck kind of song. I definitely feel like this is a song that you could get high as hell to, definitely high as fuck. It has some great lower keys on the song, and just is a real nice snaking kind of one. It's a great smoking song, and it's a very excellent smoking song. It's kind of a vintage in the cut kind of bop when you're just slurred out, just listening to Easy E, smoking hella swishers, chocolate swishers, grape swishers, that type of stuff. Just some good overall tones for just that kind of concept. This vintage 90s kind of bop on here, just a great one to kind of kick back and weave to as far as that's kind of concerned. And then Walking to My Funeral is a pretty nice cut. It's a very mellow G-funk cut. It reminds me of something that Ice Cube would do. It's an original song concept, and it's kind of some bleary kind of day commerce. Just a song about Brotha Lynch and one of these cats on here, which I think is TM Shades. It might be Mia Bruce does a good hook on here, but TM Shades is the only other guest feature on this album that drops a rap. TM Shades is the only other rapper on here that drops a verse apart from Brotha Lynch, but it's just kind of a good one about just kind of being out and about, weaving through, sipping 40s, doing gangsta shit, that type of stuff, but you get killed in the song. This is kind of the concept about three cats that lose their life in the song. It's just kind of a concept of getting that. It's an original song concept, but this has such a mellow and kind of just lackadaisical, this sheerly kind of G-funk. If you like Regulate by Warren G, but you just want something a lot more drowsy and breezy than that, just with like some horrorcore tones, I would definitely say that Walking to My Funeral is a great example of that. It's just very kind of sleepy and drowsy. I like the tone of it. It reminds me definitely of something Snoop Dogg would do if he was a little bit more like horrorcore induced and that type of stuff. Just really similar to the Doggy Style type stuff, just in a more kind of slurred out kind of way. I feel like Had to Gatcha and Walking to My Funeral are both two great examples of just getting that kind of vibe. So it's just excellent kind of tones as far as that kind of goes for G-Funk. Just good stuff that Brotha Lynch was doing with that. And then I feel like 24 Deep and Lose a Hoe, Gain a Hoe are just like vintage Brotha Lynch hung just in kind of like a more shrill kind of hypnotic kind of tone. And then back Backfades is a great smoking song. So me liking 5 out of 6 songs on here, and I'd say that I did like what I was hearing. So I liked 5 out of 6 songs on here. I feel like this is pretty good concept. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this EP like a 9.25 out of 10. I feel like it's that good. The reason why it doesn't get a 10 is just because I didn't like Jackin' for Joints. It's the only song, just because there's only 6 songs, there's less to kind of be able to give as far as more leeway as far as not liking stuff. If you don't like stuff, it kind of slashes like the score because there's only 6 songs. But me not liking Jacking for Joints, it just wasn't a good enough beat in my opinion. Just didn't quite nail the vintage golden age of hip hop that well. And then if Lose a Hoe, Gain a Hoe, which I recommend the song, but it is kind of lengthy. I just don't know how many days I would listen to like the whole song out of the times when I purchased the project. So it's just kind of, like I said, if it had been like 5 minutes, 40 seconds, something like that, I would have completely not complained about it. But it's just a very lengthy song. It's a great song, great beat, great concepts, real shrill, but it just doesn't. It's kind of lengthy, so it's this kind of thing. But I give it a 9.25. Just excellent little compaction, excellent little compact kind of project. Definitely feel like the social score, I'll go ahead and give like an 8, just because it had one single, which is really good. This is a pretty slurred out and sleepy kind of album. If you're definitely just beer sipping, beer swilling, that type of stuff with your buddies, playing Sega, playing PlayStation, some of that type of stuff, just cruising around, that type of stuff, just enjoying the times, especially in the warmer weather and cooler autumn weather, some of those type of times, I would definitely say it just works pretty damn well. But it just only had one single, and it just doesn't really have like a shrill kind of stepping out. I mean, most of this kind of has like a kind of shriller and more kind of like sullen kind of tones. It just doesn't have like any like song like Gin and Juice or something like that, which it could have used. I mean, I know that Brotha Lynch is kind of like a spooky and more. I know that Brotha Lynch is kind of a more spooky and kind of creepier individual, but it's just too bad he doesn't have like some vintage Cali bop, because he nails G funk so well. It just would feel like he'd be a real pro at doing like something that like Snoop Dogg kind of does with like Who Am I or Gin and Juice or something like that. So that's this kind of thing. But it gets an 8 social. In terms of the future, like I said, Brotha Lynch has been kind of quiet nowadays. I mean, you have to really search for the stuff that he's done, because he hasn't dropped a full blown album that's at least been regularly known about since 2013. But there is some more stuff. He's dropped a bunch of EPs, even supposedly one on N9ne's label, and he's dropped some collaboration projects and stuff like that. So I am going to check out more of these, but this is pretty excellent here.